How did just 300 men defeat an army of over 100,000 without a single real battle? This isn't a plot from a fantasy movie. It's the incredible true story of Gideon, a military leader who used brilliant psychological warfare to achieve one of the most lopsided victories in history. It's a masterclass in how strategy, not just strength, can win the day. This legendary account comes from the ancient Hebrew Bible in the Book of Judges. For years, the Israelites had been suffering under the brutal oppression of the Midianites. Every harvest season, like clockwork, the Midianites and their allies would swarm into the land like a plague of locusts, stripping the fields bare, stealing livestock, and leaving the people with nothing. Their army was immense, described as being as numerous as the sand on the seashore, with tens of thousands of soldiers and countless camels. They were a force of pure terror. In the face of this overwhelming threat, an unlikely hero emerged, a man named Gideon. He was from a humble family, and when he was first called upon to lead, he was hiding, trying to thresh wheat in a winepress to keep it from the Midianites. He was not a king or a seasoned general, but desperation had pushed the Israelites to their limit, and Gideon managed to rally an army of 32,000 men. This sounds like a respectable number, but it was still just a fraction of the enemy's strength. They were outnumbered at least 4-1. Even with 32,000 soldiers, the odds were terrifyingly long. But this is where the story takes a truly bizarre turn. Just as Gideon was preparing his men for what seemed like a suicide mission, he received a divine instruction. His army was too large. How could that be? The reasoning was that if they won with such a large force, they would believe their own strength had saved them. The victory had to be so miraculous that it could only be attributed to a higher power. So Gideon followed the first instruction, stood before his troops and announced, "Anyone who is afraid and trembling may leave." He probably expected a few hundred to take the offer. Instead, 22,000 men, 2/3 of his entire army, turned around and went home. But it wasn't over. The army was still too big. Gideon was then given a second, very peculiar test. He was to take his remaining 10,000 men down to a river for a drink of water and observe how they drank. Most of the men got down on their knees, putting their faces directly into the water to drink. But a small group, just 300 of them, remained alert. They scooped up water with their hands and lapped it like a dog, keeping their heads up and their eyes on their surroundings. The instruction was clear. Send home the 9,700 who knelt down. Only the 300 who stayed vigilant were to remain. Can you imagine Gideon's state of mind? His army had shrunk from 32,000 to just 300 men. They were about to face a professional army of over 135,000 soldiers. That's a ratio of 450-1. For every one of Gideon's soldiers, there were 450 enemy combatants. Okay, direct confrontation would be pure annihilation. This wasn't a battle. It was a death sentence. But Gideon wasn't planning a direct confrontation. He was about to execute one of the most brilliant and unconventional deception strategies ever recorded. He wasn't arming his men for a fight. He was equipping them for a performance. Each of the 300 soldiers was given not a sword or a spear for their main weapon, but 3 unusual items: a shofar, or a trumpet made from a ram's horn, an empty clay jar, and a torch to hide inside the jar. As night fell, the vast Midianite camp lay sleeping in the valley below, completely unaware. Their sentries would have seen nothing to fear, no massive army marching towards them, no sign of an impending attack. Under the cover of darkness, Gideon divided his 300 men into 3 companies of 100. They didn't march into the valley. Instead, they crept silently up the hillsides, completely surrounding the enemy camp. Each man clutched his jar, the torch concealed within, and held his trumpet ready. They were positioned on all sides, a thin, almost invisible perimeter around a sleeping giant. Then, at Gideon's signal, in the dead of the middle watch of the night, chaos erupted. All at once, from every direction around the camp, 300 men smashed their clay jars. The sudden, sharp crash of pottery echoed through the valley. Instantly, 300 blazing torches flared to life, piercing the darkness from all sides. And at that very same moment, 300 trumpets blasted a terrifying, continuous war cry. As if that wasn't enough, the men all shouted in unison, "A sword for the Lord and for Gideon." Let's break down the psychological impact of this. Imagine you are a Midianite soldier, startled from a deep sleep. You hear the sound of shattering pottery all around you, a sound that could be mistaken for weapons clashing or siege equipment breaking down your defenses. You see hundreds, maybe thousands, of torches appearing on the hillsides, making it look like you are completely encircled by an enormous army. And you hear the deafening blast of trumpets, which in ancient warfare signified the charge of a huge company of infantry or cavalry. A single trumpeter often represented a commander leading a battalion. 300 trumpets would have sounded like an army of impossible size. The Midianites had no time to think. They reacted on pure instinct and terror. In the dark, disoriented and panicked, they assumed they were being overrun by a massive, perfectly coordinated assault from all sides. They couldn't see that the torchbearers were few and far between. All they saw was light, and all they heard was noise. The confusion was absolute. In their frenzy, they began to attack anything that moved in the darkness. Midianite soldiers started fighting and killing each other, believing they were fighting the invading Israelite army. The camp descended into pure chaos. Carefully planned deception had turned the Midianites' greatest strength, their numbers, into their greatest weakness. A massive army in a state of panic is just a massive, terrified mob. They didn't even try to form a battle line. Their only thought was to escape. They fled in terror, trampling over each other to get away from the unseen enemy they believed was slaughtering them. The battle was won before it ever truly began. Gideon's 300 men hadn't thrown a single spear or swung a single sword in the main attack. They simply held their torches high, blew their trumpets, and watched as their enemy self-destructed. As the Midianites fled, Gideon's men and other Israelites who had been called up chased them down, securing a total and decisive victory. So what can we learn from this incredible story? The first and most obvious lesson is that a brilliant strategy can defeat vastly superior numbers. Gideon couldn't win with brute force, so he won with his mind. He didn't attack their bodies, he attacked their morale. This brings us to the second key lesson. Fear and confusion are devastatingly powerful weapons. Gideon understood that if you can break an enemy's will to fight, you don't need to break their lines. By creating an illusion of overwhelming force, he triggered a wave of panic that did the fighting for him. This is the essence of psychological warfare. Third, the story highlights the importance of leadership and timing. Gideon's plan required perfect coordination. If even one group had acted too early or too late, the illusion would have shattered. His ability to lead and inspire his tiny force to carry out such a daring and precise plan was critical to its success. This ancient tactic still has profound relevance today. In military strategy, operations often focus on disrupting enemy communications and creating shock and awe to induce psychological collapse. In the business world, a small startup can disrupt an entire industry, not by outspending the giants, but by using clever, unconventional marketing or innovative technology that creates confusion and forces the big players to react. In negotiations, creating the perception of leverage, even if it's not entirely real, can change the entire dynamic. Gideon's 300 is more than just a historical or religious story. It's a timeless testament to human ingenuity and the power of a well-executed idea. It proves that the size of your army, your company, or your resources isn't always what matters most. With the right strategy, a small, dedicated group can create an impact far beyond its numbers. It's a powerful reminder that the mind can win wars long before swords are ever drawn. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this dive into ancient strategy, be sure to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and hit that notification bell so you don't miss our next story. See you next time.